A new report has found the Syrian government to blame for a deadly chemical attack on a rebel-held town. The April attack in northwest Syria killed dozens of people. A United Nations investigative panel said it is confident that Damascus used sarin nerve agent during an airstrike. With more on this, I'm joined by Jean-Francois Legault. He's a chemical engineer and served as a former Canadian Army engineer officer between 1982 and 2009. He's also a chemical weapons specialist. Good morning, Jean-Francois. Thank you for being
Good morning, Marcia. Thank you.
us. For many, this is not going to come as a surprise. What is your reaction to this UN report?
Well, I think, Marcia, it doesn't come as a surprise, sadly enough, as you mentioned, for numerous reasons. First of all, the investigative body has found evidence that, based on current capabilities from the Syrian government, most likely it is the results of the Syrian government. But also, everything is pointing out towards the previous use by the Syrian government of chemical weapons. So, sadly enough, it's not surprised that everything's pointing towards the government.
Have you ever heard of a government using sarin gas on its own people before?
Yes. If we look at history, there were about 3 to 4 instances where sarin gas was used. The first one was in 1988 by the Iraqi regime on the Kurdish town of Halabja in 1988, where there were 5,000 casualties. In 1995, the Japanese group led by Shinrikyo did use sarin in the Tokyo subway attack. And then recently, in 2013, there was other allegations by the Syrian regime using chemical weapons.
Would the Syrian government be able to develop this chemical on their own? How difficult is it to create sarin gas?
That's a very good question, because we would rely on the intelligence reports as to the existing capabilities. But I think, in short, they may have the capability of developing their own chemical gases, or potentially they could be able to acquire such chemical agents from a different source. But all in all, I think it's not necessarily difficult to develop, as we've seen with the Tokyo subway, although crude in its substance. But all in all, there's a possibility that the Syrian regime may have the capability to have their own gas development facilities.
Bashar al-Assad has denied many times that he was killing or behind the killing of many of his own people. What do you think this means for the regime moving forward, this report from the United Nations?
I think it's going to be maybe a prise de conscience, or maybe a reflection period for the Syrian regime, because on one hand, they did sign the Chemical Weapons Convention in 2013, which forbids the use of chemical weapons. So they openly ratified that they will not use chemical weapons. On one hand, evidence is pointing towards their use of chemical weapons. So I think perhaps a little bit of reflection period as to what this means. And also, I think the United Nations will put a little bit more pressure on the Syrian regime to abide by its obligations.
Did Syria break any international laws by using this weapon?
In a nutshell, yes, because the Chemical Weapons Convention, which was created in 1997, forbids the use of chemical weapons, and it's very specific as to which chemicals are not to be used. So, assuming that sarin was in fact used, and I think it is, the one that was used in April, they did, in my opinion, broke the protocol of the Chemical Weapons Convention.
Jean-Francois Legault, chemical weapons specialist. Appreciate you being with us.
My pleasure. Thank you.